Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, it is so great to have you. I'm Antoinette, a New Zealander living in Germany, and in this video today I am going to be talking about some German things that still shock me even after living in Germany for over 10 years. And normally when I make these culture shock type videos, it's usually me reminiscing on the time I first arrived in Germany, because I definitely underestimated just how culturally different New Zealand and Germany would be. And I was shocked by a lot of things, but now I am so used to life in Germany that nothing really shocks me anymore, except a few things. Okay guys, so let's get into it. A culture shock that I still experience in Germany, even after all these years, is when I am maybe walking through town, or I'm at a playground, or somewhere where there are kids around, and I hear a child, a small child maybe, around like, I don't know, 7, 8, 9, swearing, like saying the F word, the English F word. The reason I'm not going to be saying the actual word is because this video is probably going to be flagged because there's no swearing allowed on YouTube. It's quite common in Germany to see a group of kids playing together and one kid will say, "What the f?" And it always just shocks me, because I don't think these kids actually know the extent of the word, because they're saying it, you know, the English version, and it has a really strong impact when you say it in English. In New Zealand you just would not hear kids saying that word, or maybe you would, but it would be considered really bad if a kid said that. I just think to native German speakers the word has way less of an impact, and it's not sort of meant in the same way. Well, maybe it is, but I just don't think so. So I'm pretty sure the kids kind of mean, "What the hell?" which is still not great to say that, but it's a little bit better than "what the f," and I think they're not meaning for it to sound terrible, but it ends up sounding really bad. And honestly, I'm not a prude. Like, I don't care if people swear, it's not that, it's just we don't throw that word around very much in English. Some people do. There may be like social groups that use it all the time, but I don't really hear it that much. And the reason why I think kids just throw this word around like it's nothing is because adults do as well. So you'll just be hearing a conversation and someone will just throw in the F word, and it always sounds super harsh to a native English speaker, but to a German speaker I don't think it sounds very harsh. In New Zealand everything is just super censored. You would never hear swearing, especially not the F word on TV, or on the radio you would never hear like a radio DJ throwing around the F word. It would always be either beeped out or just not used at all. Also, songs on the radio here in Germany, on, you know, mainstream radio, daytime radio, they are not censored at all, and so you'll hear a lot of swear words. And in New Zealand, as I mentioned, everything's like highly censored. Okay, so moving on, another culture shock that I still experience in Germany even after all these years is when I'm in like a crowd of people, maybe it's at a train station or at a shop, a really busy shop. Obviously it doesn't happen so much these days with corona and social distancing and everything, but quite often if you're sort of in a busy crowd of people, somebody will bang into you accidentally and maybe just sort of brush shoulders with you, and not meaning to do it, but you know, they'll be invading your personal space by sort of like pushing through, or you know, and they'll touch you. And in New Zealand, if this happens, you'll say, "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry," or just, "Oh, excuse me." But in Germany, if someone kind of like brushed past you or bangs into you lightly, accidentally, they will not apologize at all. They will just like sort of pretend that it hasn't happened. And it's happened to me so many times, and I don't know whether other people have experienced this, but for me, I'm always a bit shocked that they don't acknowledge the fact that they've sort of banged into me. And I think it's not meant to be done in a rude way. I think Germans, they kind of think, well, I didn't hurt them, that was an accident, so why should I apologize? And so, I don't know, we just sort of have the habit, we apologise for everything. In New Zealand, I think it's just kind of part of our culture to apologise. We over-apologise, even if we don't really need to. And in Germany, it's just not really part of the culture at all. And, you know, for somebody to apologize to you, they would have had to really like hurt you, like shove you or something. Even after all these years in Germany, if I lightly bang into somebody or I'll like brush shoulders with them accidentally, I'll always be like, oh, Entschuldigung, and I always sort of get the look like, oh, they're surprised that I'm apologizing. It's sort of like, you don't need to apologize, it's fine. So it's just a cultural difference and something that I just struggle to get used to. Okay guys, so the last two culture shocks that I still experience in Germany, I apologize if I've talked about them before, I'm sure I have, but these are just so appropriate for this video. One thing that I just can't get used to in Germany, and something that just sort of shocks me slightly every time I see it, is when I'm at a lake or a river or a swimming pool and I see a middle-aged man wearing Speedos. And I'm definitely not saying that every German man wears these, but a lot of them do, and it's usually in sort of the age group of maybe 50 upwards. It's either those full-on Speedos or those really tight swimming shorts. And this is something you would never see anymore in New Zealand, and in Germany it's something totally normal. And I actually remember years ago in the early 90s, I have a vague memory of my dad wearing these Speedos, like rocking the Speedos on the beach. And I remember he had a bit of a beer belly that would always hang over it. And it was totally normal, you thought nothing of it because lots of men wore them back then. But in Germany, a lot of German men still rock the Speedos, and it just amuses me, and it doesn't bother me at all. It's just like, why the hell not? If they want to wear Speedos, then good for them, you know, they're obviously super confident to strut around in Speedos. It just always takes me back a little bit when I see it, and it always makes me giggle a little bit. So I'm sure I'm gonna get used to the Speedos soon, but it has taken me a while. Okay guys, so moving on, last but not least, something that always shocks me a little bit when I see it in Germany, I just can't seem to get used to it, and that is when I see people wearing socks and sandals together. And this is just a classic German combination. You would not see this in New Zealand, you just wouldn't. And Germans are like famous for socks and sandals. You see it a lot. Actually, you would see it in New Zealand, but these would most likely be either German or Dutch backpackers, and they're rocking the socks and the sandals, and it'll usually be those kind of trekking sandals, and yeah, just a pair of socks. And I've never understood it. I don't see the logic behind wearing socks and sandals. Why do people wear socks and sandals? What is the logic behind this? Is it functional? Is it comfortable? I just don't know. It makes me just shake my head every time in confusion. And I've talked about the fact that a lot of Germans, they dress really well, and I think in general most Germans have a pretty high standard of how they present themselves, but it's just a certain type of German, like a certain group of Germans who wear these socks and sandals, and they're allowed to. It's totally fine, you know. I'm not saying they shouldn't, but I'm just always confused by it. And I think sort of the reaction for me as a New Zealander when I see people wearing socks and sandals would be equivalent to how Germans would feel when they see somebody in New Zealand walking around with no shoes on in the supermarket, which is totally normal, totally acceptable in New Zealand, but just a no-go in Germany. And it always shocks my husband a little bit when we're in New Zealand and he sees that. And also people in New Zealand, not everybody, but you'll see people in their pajamas. If they feel like heading to the supermarket and they're still in their pajamas, then nothing's stopping them, and they will go to the supermarket in their pajamas. And that would probably shock Germans, but for me, socks and sandals, that always shocks me. And another thing with the socks and sandals, I've seen parents dressing their kids in socks and sandals. And even at the river, I remember it was like last summer, there was a group of kids, and I was with my kids, and my kids were just like running around, splashing around in the water in bare feet, which is for me logical. And these kids, they took off their sandals and they walked into the water and were splashing around in their socks. So I feel like some Germans, they have this thing about bare feet, like not wearing shoes, that it's really bad, or it's gonna like hurt the kids' feet, or I don't know what it is, but I think a lot of Germans just don't like the idea of wearing no shoes. and in New Zealand we love to wear no shoes. Kids in New Zealand, we just grow up with really tough feet. So we can handle anything like walking over stones and cobble and just whatever without shoes on because our feet are just used to it. But in Germany, you just don't see that very much. So yeah, the socks and sandals thing shocks me every time. It just does. Okay guys, so that is all I've got for this video today. As I said, most things in Germany do not shock me anymore. I'm so used to life here in Germany and I've embraced like so many things about German culture, but those are just some things that still shock me a little bit that I can't seem to get used to. Maybe I will get used to it. Maybe one day I'll just look at somebody wearing socks and sandals and I won't think anything of it and it'll just be so normal to me. But right now, it still shocks me a little bit. So anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it entertaining. If you enjoyed it, then don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. I would love you to consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already. Feel free to connect with me on Instagram and I will see you again really soon. Bye!